Hey everyone, and welcome to Drone UHQ, where we go above and beyond flight school as we teach from experience. As always, my name is Paul. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your feedback. Thanks for delivering it eloquently and succinctly. Today, we're gonna be talking about drones in construction, the future of drone jobs in construction, the industry trends in construction, and overall where data is derived in the construction process. We're also going to give you some anecdotes and some personal stories of what we have seen in the industry. But let's be honest, construction was one of the first industries that really adopted drones. Back in 2016, I went to Mexico on behalf of Marriott to film a bunch of resorts in Cabo San Lucas. And the most interesting thing that I ever saw were drones flying all over construction sites in Mexico. I mean, they were everywhere. And this was prior to even the Part 107 law, which created the drone certification at the federal level. But let's be honest, construction drone jobs are probably one of the best jobs to get. Why is that? Well, frankly speaking, they're recurring revenue. Typically, when drones are on a construction site, they are typically actually flown prior to a build. Oftentimes, drone pilots are hired to create 2D maps and more especially 3D models of the particular environment where this build or construction is going to take place. In fact, oftentimes you'll see videos on Instagram showcasing how areas were even shot with video and then how we use CGI to implement the new developers' plans of that neighborhood over the raw footage. You can also do this with 3D modeling. But let's be honest, these great construction drone jobs offer recurring revenue and offer a pretty systematic and formulaic methodology of actually delivering to clients. Now, a lot of drone pilots who just have gotten into the business or into flying as a whole typically go to EDSPs, or I'll call them enterprise drone service providers. These are the people that hire hundreds or thousands of drone pilots to actually go out and do construction jobs. I'm sure many of you have heard of them: Skylink, Drone Bros, Fly Guys, Drone Base, which turned into Zeit View. But there's one common theme with this. Number one, if you're breaking into the industry, it's great to actually list yourself with any of these companies to get great drone jobs. Number two, I call it paid practice, because in all honesty, it's kind of breaking you into the industry and you get a sense for what's going to be asked of you. But it's really important for most of you to know that whatever you're being paid by these companies, you can typically make between a 3 and a 10x multiple if you work for the companies directly yourself. This is why confidence pays off, because if you have a repertoire of what you've been doing in construction and you can adequately and efficiently communicate that and the value of drone data to your clients, well, the chances are you're going to be paid more. Confidence does really pay. So let's talk about how drones have been used in the evolving construction industry, because like I said, drones have been used in construction for quite a long time. Back in the beginning, drones were used for the progression photos. I'm sure you've even heard of the term cardinal photos, which essentially means that you're taking photos at the edges of these construction sites from the north end, the south end, the east end, and etc. Now, those progression photos quickly evolved. I would say that kind of in 2017, 2018, we saw more than just progression photos and progression video kind of evolving into orthomosaics as a whole. If you're not familiar with our orthomosaics, make sure you check out our video on explaining what is drone mapping. These orthomosaics were essentially used as highly detailed time-lapse photography to go over the entire progression of the site as a whole. While this helped general contractors understand who was doing what, when, where, and a permanent record of installation, it didn't really provide a significant amount of detail, which makes sense as many construction companies truly didn't understand the value of drone data as a whole. But now drones are being really used on the entire life cycle of the development or the construction of a particular site. Let's talk about the pre-build use case. Oftentimes, like we've talked about, environments are mapped, CGI or plans are overlaid to them, and it showcases how the existing site will be, well, evolved and transformed into the beautiful new development that it truly is. Now here's the thing, typically these 3D models, like what I did for the Colorado Convention Center, are used in the bidding process and in the marketing process to allow these large-scale general contractors to actually get and bid the jobs, win the bid, and then end up doing the jobs as a whole. I would argue that this is a major development over the last 4 years in how drones are being used in construction. The overall formula is as follows. Typically, the entire site is mapped and modeled utilizing, obviously, drone photogrammetry. Softwares like Pix4D, softwares like Drone Deploy, softwares like Bentley's Context Capture, softwares like Esri's Drone to Map or SideScan. Frankly speaking, this 3D model is then put into another software like Fuser or Cinema 4D, where new elements are actually animated in the model to showcase how well traffic will navigate around the existing site and the site when it's under construction. They'll also see how logistics are managed, how material deliveries are managed, and how safety as a whole is in compliance with OSHA. Now that said, these complex 3D models are very difficult for entry-level drone pilots, but for experienced drone pilots who have a history of utilizing things like Pix4D or Bentley's Context Capture, you can make a significant amount of money. Personally speaking, the most amount of money that I've ever made in one day on one of those jobs was about $8,000. But if you get into animating these 3D models, you can quadruple that dollar amount and be taking home a significant amount of money. When we talk about using drones during the build case, we've talked about how progression photos are a great source of information and detail for contractors, project managers, and project engineers. But these progression photos have then moved to orthomosaic maps and 3D models as a whole, and they're pretty much taken weekly. But how does this drone data really matter? Well, it's going to keep drone projects on time. It's going to audit material deliveries, it's going to audit logistics flow, and it's going to allow a permanent record of installation. Look, I want to deep dive and talk really about the value of drone data, because one thing that we have been seeing in this evolving market of construction is that more and more people are very familiar on how to incorporate drone data into things like what we called in the past BIM or Building Information Management into VDC or Virtual Design and Construction, which is essentially when we take exterior 3D models and interior 3D models and merge that with as-built, blueprints, HVAC plans, electrical plans, water and sewer plans as a whole, even used for emergency management nowadays too. Look, let's deep dive into drone data as a whole, and let's hit a couple of different topics of personal stories so that you can understand how drone data is so valuable. When it comes to permanent record of installation, many of us simply think of, we want to make sure that contractors who are paid to do the roofing complete the roofing at a particular time that they're supposed to complete the roofing. Permanent record of installation is not just important to keep projects on time, which we'll talk about later, but it's more important to ensure that the quality of our project doesn't degrade. Give the perfect example of, let's imagine that you frame up a house, add the sheathing, and you've got a huge snowstorm coming in. Don't you think it's extremely important that the roofing contractor goes in there, lays down the underlayment, and lays down those roofing shingles prior to the storm coming in, prior to the water leaking into the house, prior to it creating musty and moldy conditions that can cause chronic illnesses that have only been recently diagnosed by the CDC in the last 10 years? Which is personally why I think that so many contractors don't understand how bad mold is for you. It causes chronic heart disease, it causes seizures, it can cause dementia, Alzheimer's, it can cause myocarditis, it can cause so many chronic diseases, it's really not even funny. So making sure that the roofer actually installed that roofing before the storm came in and got everything super wet is super critical and important. But let's get into story time. Down in Longmont, Colorado, just a few months ago, there was a huge windstorm. Now, there's a particular project going on just north of Longmont in an area called Berthoud. Many of you may know Berthoud because now it's become a famous golf course, the TPC. Great bar, by the way. But what happened at this particular house is they were putting up framing for the roof. It was a very complex roof line because it was a luxury build. Now, here's the thing. When this windstorm came through, it completely destroyed all the roof framing and roof joists that had just been put up, leaving the general contractor in a bind because now he's got to spend probably $50,000 to $100,000 to pay the roofing framer to redo all the joists, to order new joists, and to make sure that the roof is actually installed correctly. But the general contractor had a question in his mind. What was that question? Was the roof framing actually blocked off, meaning between the roof joists, did they have actual framing joists between those to kind of connect them all together, to square them off, and to make them stronger as a unit? Were hurricane ties actually installed? For many of you who are not familiar with construction, hurricane ties are actually quite a new thing, developed because of, yes, that's right, hurricanes. They're essentially these metal ties that take our joists and tie them into the walls themselves. So that way, if the roof is lifted, the hurricane ties the roof down. Well, thanks to a pilot named Joby Lewis out of Windsor, Colorado, he had actually mapped the site 2 days prior to that windstorm. In his map and model, you could actually see that the roof joists had not been blocked off. The roof joists had not had hurricane ties installed, which means the general contractor could go back to the roofing framer and say, you did not do your job right. I am not repaying you to do this. You must go back and correct this mission or this job on your own dime and accord. So when we talk about the value of drone data, this one particular example had an impact anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 on this particular project. We're keeping the actual number confidential because there may be a continued legal battle going on and we don't want to be a part of it. When we're talking about auditing material deliveries, there was once a training that we did for a company called Bradbury Stam down in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And actually, before we did a training with them, we showed them the power of volumetrically measuring and auditing the material piles as a whole. So what we did is we were told how much material was actually ordered as a sub-aggregate to lay down and fill a foundation to make sure that it was flat and ready to pour concrete and also build on upon itself. Well, Bradbury Stam had essentially paid for, I forget the exact number of cubic yards. I want to say it was like 20,000 cubic yards of dirt, essentially, which is a significant amount. When we actually went in and we measured the area that needed this filling done, so we had the number, we knew exactly how much material it would take to fill that. Well, then we measured how much material they had actually delivered to the site and found that there was a significant deviation between the materials that were paid for and the materials that were delivered. In fact, about a $3,500 delta between those two things. Now, in an investigation by the general contractor with that particular quarry, the quarry director had actually admitted to the fact that they had scraped off the top of those trucks. In fact, every single truck. And so that company then delivered $3,500 of extra material. So think about the drone data savings in just that story alone. But let's talk about timelines. You know, oftentimes we hear drone pilots talking about how drones keep projects on time. But few can eloquently communicate exactly how drones keep projects on time and why the value of keeping projects on time is so valuable. Why is keeping construction projects on time so valuable? Two reasons. One is labor costs, and two, we're going to call government or regulatory fines. Typically nowadays, governments have been taken advantage of and they know it. And so what they're trying to do is keep construction projects on time because it can also become a political liability. So they have figured out a compelling system to fine developers and construction companies for every single day that the project is not completed. They're typically given a timeline, finish the project by February 1st. If the project is not completed by February 1st, typically the developer and construction company is fined anywhere from $10,000 to multiple millions of dollars per day. The larger the project and the larger the capital outlay, typically the larger the regulatory fines will be. Now, that's a significant cost upon the regulator and the company. So anytime that you can find out the regulatory fines, we looked up a construction project here in northern Fort Collins and we found out that regulatory fine was almost 6 figures for each day that it was not complete, which is significant. So when a contractor asks you, Why is drone data valuable as a whole? Look up their regulatory fines and say, if I can keep your project on time and it costs you $1,000 per week for 36 weeks, that's $36,000. The regulatory fine here in this case is $50,000. So if I keep you on time by knowing your materials audits, your timeline audits, and even your concrete and volumetric audits, we're gonna know right away if your project is on time, so that way we can fix the problem before it becomes a problem. Example, let's say that a concrete contractor is tasked to provide 1,000 cubic yards of concrete every single day to ensure that their particular phase of construction is done on time. Well, we measure the site prior to the delivery of concrete, and then we measure the site, let's say, after 1 week. We find that even though they were tasked to do, let's say, 1,000 cubic yards of concrete per day, that would be 5,000 cubic yards per week, we find that they've only delivered 3,250 cubic yards of concrete. What does this mean? This means that we're already at a 2-day timeline deficiency, which means that your drone data is already valuable enough for you to be paid twice as much as you're already being paid right now. Do the math. When it comes to project efficiency and timeline efficiency as a whole, drones can really spot problems when contractors don't get things done on time, when materials are not actually provided as promised, but also if logistics are causing problems or things like cut and fill efficiencies, which we'll talk about later in the future of drone data. Lastly, I think it's really important to talk about how drone data has now been intertwined with other forms of data, overlaying LiDAR data and photogrammetric data, overlaying as-built data, overlaying blueprints, and overlaying overall plans as a whole to just see the true change and involvement of the construction as it's progressed in its timeline. In all honesty, the intertwining of drone data with traditional data has become more and more infused. And we're seeing that with drone programs like Drone to Map and SiteScan from companies like, or traditional geospatial companies like Esri, which are providing an ultimate form and means of marrying all forms of data combined into one simple place where any regulator, administrator, executive, or project manager or project engineer can see all the plans in one place at any given time in multiple different formats that work for them. It's visual communications at a whole new level that really creates a much more cohesive team to get projects done. So let's talk about new construction deliverables that pay the best amount of money. Look, one of the things that we're seeing nowadays, and we've been seeing it with one of our biggest drone clients here at Drone U, are drone tours, or some people call them fly-through tours, some people call them Cinewhoop or FPV. But these are videos that are shot for social media during the project, but also at the completion of the project as a whole, where a drone is literally flying through the entire project. We can see everything that's done, and it's essentially showcased to the developers what has been done, what has been completed, and what it looks like and how it is to navigate the space as a whole. These jobs pay extremely well. We have friends here in Denver that are getting paid between $3,500 and $9,500 per construction project to do those videos. Not per project, excuse me, per video. 3D modeling and turning these 3D models into animations via Fuser or Cinemore 4D probably has the most lucrative basis possible. Look, mapping the Colorado Convention Center was probably one of my peak jobs, the denouement. It was probably one of my favorite jobs as it was the hardest job I've ever done. 5,300 photos later after 14 hours of flying that drone manually because there's no GPS available thanks to the AT&T building at the northwest corner of the property meant that that was all done, not even in free flight mode, but in DJI Go 4 on a 2-second timed shot for 14 hours. That project I thought was great because I made a lot of money on it. But do you know what? The guy who animated the project on top of my build, he literally made, I think it was $48,000. Now compared to my $8,000, that's not much. So if you can learn Pix 4D, Bentley plus Cinema 4D, you can really expand your capacity to create a lucrative business. Not only that, when it comes to recurring revenue, you get in with the right company and now you're gonna be doing bidding and marketing for some time. Point cloud hyperlapses. We talked a lot about this last year as point cloud hyperlapses became something that we would even sell here at Drone U. Point cloud hyperlapses allow a developer or a builder to essentially see the progression of the site from any angle possible. You can go fly a site and do orbital video the same way every single week, but you're only gonna see the progression of that site from one perspective. When we do point cloud hyperlapses, we essentially create a 3D model of the site every single week. Then what we do is we actually create a video fly-through motion every single week. But we can actually showcase many different parts of the project. We can create whatever field of view that we want. If we're not happy with the camera motion, we can change it and do whatever we want. We can do a whole new thing. With point cloud hyperlapses, you literally see the project being built in a very short period of time in a very cool, nuanced way that people haven't seen before. There's a lot of really cool things that you can do with point cloud hyperlapses that really just take your deliverables to the next level. Cut and fill efficiencies. Now, Propeller Arrow has been big on this probably since 2017, 2018, and they've created their own processing software on top of those Propeller Arrow points that you have seen to create amazing cut and fill efficiencies. What are we talking about here? Well, let's imagine that we're creating a huge school on a hill. We need to know how much dirt that we need to fill, aka create level, but we also need to know where to take that dirt from and make sure that our slope plan and our water plan is still in compliance with city, local, or state regulations to make sure that the flow of water doesn't actually flood our building, cause any traffic problems, and doesn't actually cause any damage to other surrounding buildings as a whole. So when we talk about moving dirt from one place, cutting, to fill level, we want to make sure that we're only taking absolutely as much dirt as we possibly need and moving it to the areas that need to be filled. We don't want to take too much dirt or move too much dirt or move too much dirt and then have to cut again, which happens all the time with earthworks on construction projects. So I would say that a future deliverable or a deliverable that's kind of maturing and coming to market are these cut and fill efficiencies, meaning over the life of the project, did you pay labor too much? Did you move too much dirt? Did you take away too much dirt and not adhere to your slope analysis with the city, county, or state? These things are going to be very, very, very important, especially as we have more 100-year floods and more extreme weather events as a whole. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I'm just saying in case it happens. This is not a climate podcast, nor will it ever be. Anyway, okay. Future of drone data. One of the things that we talked about in the mapping video that we put out a couple months ago before the new year is we talked about the future of drone data and how the interconnectivity and the capacity to communicate with fellow teammates and also work on projects with fellow teammates is going to become the future of drone mapping data, especially of construction data. That future is already here. Companies like Esri have already created programs like Drone to Map and SiteScan that can integrate classic and traditional geospatial programs like ArcGIS Pro and that governments use. Now you can use all these programs with different teams and collaborate. You can add drawings in, multiple layers of like LiDAR, multiple layers of changes and change orders. You can literally do so much. You can even inventory everything in these programs. This is the future of drone data where collaboration, connectivity, and communication all happen in one place, and you're not having to pay $500 per user or more. I don't know how much it is, but this is going to really help streamline things. I think other future drone data deliverables that we're gonna see are things like Luma Labs, lumalabs.ai. Luma Labs essentially takes your orbital data and is gonna create a really cool portrait or landscape video for you to use in marketing for the construction company, for the developer, or for the people involved as a whole. Now, it's really important to know that that's just a one-off app. You can already do those video animations in different programs. It's just that a lot of people don't know those advanced features and which programs to use, Pix4D Mapper. So my point here is that we're gonna see more and more digital twin data that's gonna be thrown into these AI apps to produce very specific deliverables very quickly. So we're gonna take existing data and augment it with AI to really get marketing videos, short form videos, etc. Now, the future of construction drone data, I think, is already here. We are gonna see more and more drones that are gonna be mapping these sites, but then actually building the model in real time. Again, Esri already doing it. we're seeing, what is it? Not modal.ai. I can't remember the name of the company, but they add essentially a computer to an M300 and you can process the data all right there through a Linux code. That's really cool. So what I'm saying, the future of drone data is where we fly construction sites remotely and we are processing the data as we are flying, and we are delivering that data in a very streamlined form in a very quick manner. Now, I will say, as I've said in the mapping video, there's a huge opportunity for many of you out there. If you want to crush the competition and work for construction companies, you can always deliver data faster. You can create an orthomosaic and deliver it in the same hour using things like Pix4D React. That's a great way to crush the competition and give contractors exactly what they need in real time. When we talk about construction drone jobs of 2024, it's gonna be really important that you go out and capture more data, that you're able to create 3D models every single week so you can offer these advanced deliverables and you can make more money and more lucrative business contracts as a whole. When we talk about industry trends with drones in construction, one thing that I've been seeing a lot of with our existing clients is more and more people are moving away from geo-referencing their maps and models. We're also seeing a lot more construction companies utilizing the RTK antenna on the drone to offer real-time corrections to those photos so that processing can be much faster as a whole. Look at companies like FreeFly Systems that have essentially adopted their own N-Trip network so that you can connect your Astro drone to their virtual reference station or N-Trip network, whatever term you want to use, to essentially get your real-time corrections. Even Drone Deploy has tried or attempted the same thing. Many people though have called me and stated, hey, I've been using the RTK antenna through some of these other networks and I'm not getting accurate Z-axis elevations. There's a lot of questions that can go into geospatial data, like what type of height are we using? Are we using the orthometric height? Are we using the geoid height? Or are we using the raw WGSM 84 height? Because those are all different heights. So there's a lot of information that goes into geospatial data, georeferencing as a whole. And we're seeing a lot of construction companies pretty much saying, we want to stay away from georeferencing because it's just a cleaner, less legal, less red tape way of going about things as a whole. Other industry trends that we're seeing is a lot more animations pre-project and post-project to really showcase the value of the construction site, the build, and the timeline as a whole. And lastly, when it comes to construction and industry trends, we're seeing a lot more Cinewhoops, FPVs flying through these construction projects to create really cool social media videos for developers and construction contractors as a whole. When it comes to drones in construction, if you want to learn how to do all these deliverables, the cool thing is here at Drone U, we have the largest library of drone-based classes on the internet. I can say that not only is our library the largest, but it's also the deepest as our content goes deep, so you know exactly what you need to do to produce these deliverables and nothing else. If you're ready to take your confidence to new heights and you want to fly like a boss and crush the competition, then it's time for you to become a Drone U member and check out our construction class, our operating on construction sites class. In addition, check out the mapping class as a whole. It's long, but it is valuable, and it's going to give you the recurring revenue that you need to make your drone business take flight. Again, thanks for joining me here at Drone U. I'd love to hear your feedback. In all honesty, in this industry, we need a lot more positivity, a lot more collaboration, because it's not about making our slice of the pie bigger, it's about making the pie bigger. My name is Paul, and welcome to Drone U HQ.